What happens when one of music's most legendary voices sits down with late-night television's most unpredictable host, and the conversation takes a turn no one saw coming? That's exactly what unfolded the night Chaka Khan appeared on Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen, in a moment that would leave audiences stunned and social media ablaze for weeks. The energy in the studio that evening was electric, charged with the unspoken anticipation that something extraordinary or explosive was about to happen. When Chaka Khan, the 10-time Grammy winner and undisputed queen of funk, strode onto the set, her presence filled the room before she even spoke. Dressed in her signature glamour and exuding quiet confidence, she took her seat opposite Andy, whose mischievous smile and glinting eyes hinted that he was in the mood to stir things up. "Chaka Khan, the legend herself," Andy announced as she settled in. "Thank you for being here tonight." "Thank you for having me," she replied smoothly, her voice carrying that familiar warmth that had captivated fans for decades. But then she added almost playfully, "Though I've heard some interesting things about this show." Andy raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Oh, really? All good things, I hope." "Well," Chaka said, adjusting her seat, "let's just say I've been warned you like to ask the questions other people won't ask." "Guilty as charged," Andy chuckled. "But that's what makes for good television, don't you think? Speaking of which, let's start with something that's been on everyone's mind. Your recent comments about the state of the music industry. They've caused quite a stir." The audience quieted. Chaka's smile tightened slightly, her tone even but edged. "Which comments specifically, Andy?" "I've said a lot of things lately." "The ones where you said younger artists lack authenticity," he pressed, leaning forward. "You claimed that today's musicians care more about social media followers than actual musical talent." The tension was palpable. Chaka's eyes narrowed, but her composure held. "I stand by what I said. Music used to be about soul, about connecting with people on a deeper level. Now everything feels manufactured, processed, designed to go viral instead of moving souls. Don't you think that's a bit harsh?" Andy countered, his tone shifting into the sharpness viewers recognized as a prelude to controversy. "Artists like Beyoncé, Rihanna, even Taylor Swift, they've built incredible careers in this digital age. Are you saying they lack authenticity?" Chaka's fingers drummed softly against the armrest as she considered her response. "Those are established artists who paid their dues. I'm talking about a different generation, the ones who think fame is owed to them, the ones who believe a catchy hook and a pretty face are enough to sustain a career." "Interesting perspective," Andy said carefully, though his voice carried the unmistakable tone of provocation. "But you've worked with some of these newer artists. You collaborated with Kanye West. You've praised Drake in interviews. Isn't that a bit contradictory?" The question hung in the air like a live wire. Chaka's jaw set ever so slightly, the flicker of irritation just visible. "There's a difference between recognizing talent and endorsing the state of the industry, Andy. The artists you mentioned, those men respect the craft. They understand the history." "Fair enough," Andy nodded. Though his eyes told a different story, he wasn't finished. "Let's talk about history then. Your own history has some interesting chapters. The struggles with addiction, the financial issues, the legal battles with record labels. How do you reconcile criticizing today's artists when your own career hasn't been without controversy?" The audience collectively inhaled. Chaka's expression hardened. For the briefest moment, the legendary calm she carried seemed to waver. "Excuse me?" she said coolly. "I'm just saying," Andy pressed on, either oblivious to or deliberately ignoring the warning in her tone. "Isn't there something to be said for how today's artists have more control? More ways to protect themselves from the predators that, let's face it, took advantage of artists from your generation?" Chaka leaned back, fixing him with a steady, piercing gaze. "You want to talk about predators, Andy? Let's talk about them. Let's talk about the executives who stole publishing rights, who worked artists to exhaustion, who fed addictions instead of offering help. You think today's Instagram celebrities understand that struggle? I think they've learned from artists like you," Andy replied, matching her stare. "They've watched what happened to legends like yourself, and they found ways to avoid those pitfalls." For a long, charged moment, the two locked eyes, neither willing to yield. The air in the studio was thick with tension, the kind that comes only when truth, ego, and history collide in front of a live audience. Whatever anyone had expected from that night's interview, this wasn't it. What began as a conversation about music had become something much deeper, a raw, unfiltered clash between generations, perspectives, and the very definition of authenticity itself. Artists like myself, Chaka repeated slowly, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. What exactly do you mean by that, Andy? The temperature in the studio seemed to drop. The tension was thick enough to taste. Andy hesitated for a fraction of a second, clearly realizing he was treading into dangerous territory. But his instinct for drama, and perhaps the lure of viral television, pushed him forward. I mean artists who've had to overcome personal demons, he said carefully, who've had to rebuild their careers after making mistakes. Chaka's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. Mistakes? She echoed sharply. You're calling my life experiences mistakes? I'm not judging, Andy said quickly, though his tone betrayed a hint of condescension. I'm just saying that maybe the younger artists you're criticizing have learned something from watching the careers of their predecessors. Their predecessors, Chaka repeated, her voice rising with icy precision. You mean the artists who built the foundation these children are standing on? The ones who fought for creative control? Who demanded respect for their craft, who made it possible for every one of these social media darlings to even have a career? That's not what I meant, Andy tried to interject. But Chaka was no longer listening. No, Andy. Let's be clear about what you did mean, she said, her tone carrying the authority of a woman who'd survived and conquered an entire industry. You meant that artists from my generation were somehow less smart, less business savvy, less capable of protecting ourselves. You meant our struggles were our fault, that we should have known better. Andy opened his mouth to respond, but Chaka held up a hand, silencing him instantly. The room went still. For once, Andy Cohen, the master of chaos and confrontation, found himself at a loss for words. Chaka's eyes burned with the kind of power that comes only from truth and endurance. The Queen of Funk wasn't defending herself. She was delivering a masterclass. You want to talk about business savvy, Andy? She said, her voice now calm but filled with warning. Let me educate you. When I started out, there were no social media managers, no streaming platforms, no direct access to fans. We had to rely on record executives, radio programmers, and television hosts who thought they knew better than we did about our own art. Andy shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. Chaka, I think there might be a misunderstanding here. No misunderstanding at all, she snapped, her voice ringing through the studio with commanding clarity. You think these young artists are smarter because they have Instagram accounts and streaming numbers. Let me tell you something about smart. Andy, smart is surviving in an industry that tried to silence women, especially women of color, long before social justice became a trending hashtag. The audience was riveted, every eye fixed on her. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was history being spoken aloud. Smart, Chaka continued, her passion rising with each word, is fighting for creative control when executives want to turn you into a product. Smart is staying true to your art when everyone around you tells you to compromise for commercial success. Smart is rebuilding your career after the industry chews you up and spits you out, not because you made mistakes, but because you refuse to be anyone other than who you are. Andy attempted to steer the conversation back to neutral ground, his host instincts kicking in. But surely you can appreciate that today's artists have advantages your generation didn't. They can control their own narratives, build direct relationships with fans. Control their narratives? Chaka interrupted, laughing without humor. Andy, do you even know what controlling your narrative means? It means telling the truth about your experiences, even when that truth makes people uncomfortable. It means standing up for yourself when powerful people try to diminish your accomplishments. It means not allowing anyone, including talk show hosts, to reduce your life's work to sound bites and scandal. The silence that followed was deafening. Andy's usual charm faltered. For once he looked uncertain, even shaken, but pride wouldn't let him back down completely. I respect everything you've accomplished, Chaka, he said finally. I really do. But don't you think some of your criticism of younger artists might come from a kind of generational disconnect? The words landed like a slap. Chaka's entire demeanor shifted, her expression darkening. Those who knew her best could see the storm building behind her eyes. Generational disconnect, she repeated slowly. Are you suggesting I'm out of touch, Andy? I'm suggesting that every generation thinks the next one is somehow lesser, he said, attempting to sound diplomatic but coming off patronizing. It's natural to feel that way when you see the industry changing so rapidly. Chaka leaned forward, her gaze locked on him with surgical precision. The audience barely breathed. In that moment, it was clear. Andy Cohen had poked the wrong legend, and Chaka Khan, the Queen of Funk, was about to remind him why she'd earned that title. "Let me tell you what's natural." "Andy," Chaka said, her voice dropping to that low, dangerous calm that everyone who knew her recognized as the calm before the storm. "What's natural is respecting the artists who came before you. What's natural is understanding that without the foundation we built, there would be no platform for these new artists to stand on." Andy's expression faltered, the confidence on his face slipping into unease as he realized he might have badly misjudged the situation. Still, his pride wouldn't let him back down. "But isn't that exactly what I'm saying?" He replied, "These artists have built on what you created. They've taken it to new levels." "New levels?" Chaka's voice rose slightly, the sheer power in it making everyone in the studio sit up straighter. "Andy, do you think autotune is a new level? Do you think buying followers is innovation? Do you think manufacturing viral moments is artistic evolution?" "That's not fair," Andy protested, showing his first flash of genuine emotion. "There are incredible artists today who are pushing boundaries, experimenting with new sounds, reaching global audiences in ways that weren't possible in your era." "My era," Chaka repeated, her tone cool and cutting. "My era gave the world funk music, Andy. My era gave the world soul music that actually had soul. My era gave the world artists who could perform live without backing tracks, who could write their own songs, who could play instruments, who could move audiences through raw, unfiltered talent, not theatrical gimmicks." The audience was dead silent now, caught between awe and discomfort as they watched two strong personalities collide in real time. Andy tried to steady himself, but his usual smirk had faded into something closer to desperation. "But you can't dismiss an entire generation of artists just because they use different tools," he argued. "That's like saying rock music wasn't valid because it used electric guitars instead of acoustic." Chaka stared at him for a long, cold moment before answering. "Andy, the difference between an electric guitar and an acoustic guitar is the difference between two instruments that both require skill to play. The difference between what I'm talking about and what you're defending is the difference between artistry and artifice." "That's a pretty harsh judgment," Andy said defensively. "And honestly, it sounds a bit elitist." The word hung in the air like a blade. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Chaka's eyes narrowed. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but it carried lethal weight. "Elitist?" she repeated. "Did you just call me elitist for expecting artists to have talent, Andy?" Andy flushed, but he pushed on weakly. "I'm saying that dismissing an entire generation because they work differently than you did comes across as elitist, yes." Chaka rose slowly from her chair, every movement deliberate, controlled, regal. Her eyes blazed with an intensity that made the entire studio lean forward. "Let me tell you something about elitist, Andy Cohen," she said, her voice ringing through the air like thunder. Standing at her full height, the Queen of Funk commanded the room. "Elitist is thinking you can invite a legend onto your show and spend the entire interview tearing down everything she's accomplished. Elitist is assuming you know more about the music industry than someone who's been fighting in these trenches since before you were born." Andy stayed seated, but the confidence had drained from his face entirely. The audience watched in stunned silence as one of television's most confrontational hosts found himself completely outmatched. "Chaka, please," he tried weakly. "I think we're misunderstanding each other. I never meant to suggest your accomplishments weren't significant." "Significant?" Chaka's voice rose, filling every corner of the studio. "Andy, I've sold over 70 million records worldwide. I've won 10 Grammys. I've been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, once as a solo artist and once with Rufus. I've influenced generations of musicians who still call me for advice and guidance. And you want to debate with me about what constitutes real artistry?" Every camera caught the moment. The raw emotion, the electricity. The interview had turned into something far more powerful than entertainment. It was a reckoning. Andy tried to salvage control. "I wasn't trying to debate your legacy," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "I just wanted an honest conversation about how the industry has evolved." Chaka laughed, but the sound was cold and weary, filled with decades of frustration. "Honest conversation? Andy, There's nothing honest about inviting someone onto your show under the pretense of celebrating their career, only to spend the entire time trying to diminish their perspective and invalidate their experiences. Andy's face flushed deeper. That wasn't my intention. I have nothing but respect for you. Then why? Chaka demanded, stepping closer to his desk. Did you spend this entire interview suggesting my criticism of today's manufactured industry comes from jealousy, outdatedness, or elitism? Why imply that my generation's struggles were our own fault? Why suggest that artists today are more business savvy than the pioneers who built the blueprint they're using? The studio was silent. The hum of the cameras was the only sound. Andy opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time in his career, Andy Cohen was speechless. You want to know what elitist really is, Andy? Chaka said finally, her voice now calm again, resonant with truth. Elitist is thinking you can sit behind that desk and psychoanalyze artists who've lived through things you can't imagine. Elitist is believing that your commentary carries the same weight as the experience of someone who's actually created timeless art. Andy finally found his voice, small and uncertain. I was just trying to present different perspectives. No, Andy, Chaka said, shaking her head. You were trying to create controversy. You wanted your viral moment. You wanted me to say something you could spin into headlines. But real artists, artists with integrity, don't play those games. The silence stretched, heavy and absolute. Andy looked down, his trademark smirk gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. The audience sat frozen, realizing they were witnessing something raw, real, and unforgettable. You know what's really sad about this, Andy? Chaka said at last, her voice soft but still commanding. I came here tonight excited to talk about my music, about my new projects, about the incredible artists I'm collaborating with across generations. I came here to celebrate the beauty and power of authentic artistry. Andy looked up, clearly shaken. We can still do that, he offered. We can start over. Chaka smiled sadly and shook her head. No, Andy, we can't. Because what just happened here revealed something fundamental about how you see artists like me. You see us as relics to be challenged instead of treasures to be celebrated. You see our standards as obstacles instead of wisdom to be respected. Turning to the audience, she stood tall, every inch the legend she was. I've spent my entire career fighting to be respected as an artist, a businesswoman, and a creator. I fought record executives, critics, and industry gatekeepers who tried to silence my voice. And I did not fight all those battles just to sit here and be lectured by someone who thinks provocation equals journalism. Andy tried one last time. Chaka, please. I mishandled this interview. Can we reset? Can we talk about your music? For a brief second, something in Chaka's expression softened, then hardened again with resolve. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time, she said, her voice calm, echoing Maya Angelou's wisdom. You've shown me exactly how you view artists from my generation, and I believe you. With that, Chaka Khan, the queen of funk, gathered her dignity, turned to the main camera, and said clearly, to everyone watching, remember this. Real artistry can never be diminished by those who don't understand it. Never let anyone make you feel small for having standards or demanding respect. Without another word, she walked off the set, head high, grace intact. The studio erupted in stunned silence. Andy Cohen sat frozen at his desk, the weight of what had just happened settling like a storm cloud over the studio. For once, the king of controversy had met his match and lost.